Well, hopefully this will be useful for everybody. There's a lot we could do with grading, and so we had to make choices here. All right, so we're going to get started, and I just want to thank you for coming. Lynn is going to be helping with the chat. If you have questions, you're welcome to ask them there. You can also interrupt me. I'm okay with that. I think we have the right size of group where we are comfortable with that. And we'll get started. And I do want to point out that I also have a practice 2020 class that I use for one of my other sessions. And so at the end or later on, when you are ready, I can invite you to join that if you would like to. All right, so I wanted to start with sharing a definition of assessment. And I know we're talking about grading. Grading and assessment are awfully close to one another. And so I also have a little link here. Anything that you see that is underlined, you can link out. Linda Seski, who works with higher education and assessment, defines it as the process of gathering and discussing information in order to develop a deep understanding of what students know, understand, and can do with their knowledge as a result of their educational experience. And when I am in the middle of grading, I remind myself of that, because grading, we're going to talk about Canvas tips, and we're going to go through Canvas. I'm going to show you different tips and things, but I also would like to challenge you to think about your own pedagogy and to continue to think about it. It's something that I consider in an ongoing way. So today's session, our goal is to leverage Canvas to help students earn the best grades they can without you going crazy, okay? Plus some pedagogical food for thought. And I have 3 items here, including an article about eliminating the grading system, pros and cons, which is kind of an interesting article to take a look at, a sample grading contract, and a few notes from Grading for Equity. All right, so I want to start out and share with you my grading goals really quickly. I am always looking for, when I'm grading students' work, I want it to be easy and sustainable. I don't want to be spending extra time grading when I don't need to be. I want it to be fair, and I also want it to be equitable. I want to include aspects to help students move forward with their learning. That's the goal. And I want it to be metacognitive and reflective. And I also want to be transparent with my students. They're in my classes, they need to know what my guidelines are. And I recognize that my guidelines are very different than other teachers, and they should be. You know, there's different sorts of content areas that have different goals. Did anyone have a question? All right. Okay, so I wanted to go to Canvas now, where we're going to look at assignments, weights, rubrics, etc. And I want to showcase that I've also included some slides here that will include this particular Google Slide session in the remote teaching resources area. But these will just sort of remind you of some of the things that you see. So I'm going to move to our practice class here. And we're going to go through a few different items and things to think about. And Lynn, please feel free to jump in. And one of the great things about working with Lynn, in addition to the fact that we actually share a lot of similarities about the way we see things, we also have some key differences. And I want to be very forthright and share with you that while I've used Canvas for 9 or 10 years, however long it's been around, that doesn't mean that my way of doing things is the right way of doing things. You have to think about your goals. So the first thing I want to share with you that we're going to look at grades. We're going to look at assignments. We'll look at discussions, and we will go down to look at quizzes. And even though these things are not available for students to see, I want to show you the different aspects of these. So I want to start first with assignments, and we're going to click on all the different little tools here, as many as we can here. So I wanted to show you, this is just a sample course, and I wanted to show you here quite a few things. The first is that you can decide to weight your grades or not weight your grades. And if you want to add an assignment, you have a little click here where you can add an assignment. And you have choices that you can make with the assignments, whether you're going to have it be worth points, how it's going to display. If there's an assignment group, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, what types of options you would like students to be able to turn things in as. If you are teaching a face-to-face class, you can actually choose to have them have no submission, knowing that you're going to input those grades. Obviously, with remote teaching, everybody's turning things in via Canvas. So you could choose the text entry. I always like to give options for website URLs and file uploads. Even though I did not restrict the upload file types, I do request that students use Word if they are not using Google Docs. That's something that I put in my notes and that I remind them about because I can't open everything. You can choose whether something is going to be a group assignment or have peer reviews. And you can also include due dates or not, okay? I am one of those teachers that does not include due dates. So you can choose to opt out of including due dates. I know that students appreciate due dates because they can look at them from their calendar. I appreciate not using due dates because there are times that I want students to have the assignment be open for longer, and it is a lot easier to not have to mess with it. But what that requires from me is that I have to have my regular time to communicate. Lynn's communication guidelines, that's something that I would put in my communication guidelines. And also, there are times when I want to notify users that content has changed. It sends them a little email. And sometimes I want to send that to them if I have forgotten to make an assignment live. When I create my assignments, I can choose to just save it, or I can save and publish it. And when you are creating assignments, I like to, as a rule of thumb, when I'm creating assignments, I only want to save and publish them when I'm ready for the students to see them. If I publish them too early, students will look for those assignments and try to finish them before I'm ready for them to do so. So if we've created our assignment, we can then decide to save it or save it and publish it. I also would like to show you, I'm going to show you another assignment as well, but this little sign right here for check accessibility, you can click on that and it lets you know whether your assignment is accessible or not. And if it isn't, it gives tips for fixing them and actually helps you to fix them, which is a really wonderful aspect of Canvas. You can add, record and upload media. You can embed an image. You can link something, and you can insert something such as a YouTube video right into this. And I will show you an example of that in just a little bit. All right, so I want to go back to assignments, and I want to talk to you about weighting because I brought that idea up, and then I moved into just a quick little assignment. I just wanted to show you what that assignment had, and then I want to also show you some sample assignments. So with weighting assignments, I like to weight assignments. That way I don't have to worry about how many points I'm adding. Some teachers like to say, okay, there's going to be 1,000 points and everything has to fit within those 1,000 points, and you can go ahead and do that. The pro for doing that is that students can easily figure out their grades without having to worry about the weighting. The con is that if you want to add an assignment, then you have to play around with those points. So I tend to weight my assignments. You can go to group, and I can add a group here and call it whatever I would like and put that it's this percentage of the grade. At the end of the day, you're going to want to make sure your percentages add up to 100%. Mine do not, and I want to be able to show you that as well in just a minute. So I want to show you I'm going to the three dots here. I'm going to the assignments and group weights. And so I can see right here that my weights do not add up to 100%. So I need to go back and fix that. And so sometimes, I mean, even if you think you know what you're doing, they're not always going to add up. And I want to show you here too that you can import assignments, which I will show you how to do in just a little bit. But once
Hey, Janet,
yes.
Can I say something about the weighted groups?
Absolutely.
Weighting your assignment groups is good if you have low stakes assignments that you're giving points for, that you want your students to do, but that you don't want to actually, it doesn't necessarily fit the outcomes of the course, it's just practice. If you give those a low weight in the grade book, then the students are not spending so much time just doing what they might consider busy work, and then focus on the more concrete assignments. However you choose to break down the weights in your assignment areas, consider how each of those assignment areas align with your course outcomes, and make your weights accordingly.
Right, and it's a good idea to ask your department chair if there's guidelines about that, if they have that, or some suggestions. When I've taught in various English departments, I've heard anything from 70% should be essays to 80%. And so, you know, they may have some different ideas as well. But this right here helps you to see what's going on. And it also reminds you that if you've imported an assignment that you really want them to do, that it needs to move somewhere, or you need to make this worth a percentage. So I wanted to take a moment to show you that I can move this assignment up here. So you can move assignments around very easily anywhere you would like to. You will see discussion forums in the assignment area, even though you create them through discussions. And you can also, as long as students have not turned things in, you can unpublish something, although I have something there I'm going to show you. You can unpublish it. If it's not allowing you, what it's trying to tell you is that somebody has already turned something in there. So you can publish and unpublish. And I use the publish and unpublish regularly. I only keep a unit open at a time. So I do not want students to see all my assignments from the entire semester right away. And that's why I keep them unpublished, even, you know, as I use them from semester to semester. And you can see here also, it tells you if the assignment is actually located in a module or not. And if it's not located in a module and students don't have access to your assignments, you best move them to a module so that they understand that they need to do those, okay? I also would like to show you a couple of assignments here. And one is this sample writing project. This is a bigger assignment. It's worth 10%. And I wanted to show you an example here of an assignment where you can use the assignment as a page. Okay, so it has a lot of material on it. And if you want to, you can create an assignment where everything they need for the assignment is actually located in the assignment itself. Meaning that there's a little video, tutorial, and you can add more. You can add more pages or tutorials that you want them to take a look at. Here's an assignment due date with a link to peer review guidelines, and you can, like, if you're in this class, you can, as a teacher, you can take a look at these and actually use anything here yourself. I have the student learning outcomes, the writing prompt itself with another link to a fallacies Quizlet, the parameters, and this is for English, but you can do this for whichever, problem, audience, purpose, and some tips. And students are able then to submit just to this, and they've seen all the material. Now, this may not be the way you want to do things, but I do know sometimes teachers say, I create all these wonderful pages, but students do not go to those pages, which is problematic. So one way you can deal with that is put all the information in the assignment itself. And I'd like to encourage you that, for example, in the assignments that I give, I include the outcomes, the prompt, the parameters, and I call it those each and every time. And so I would like to encourage you that if you have high stakes assignments, that however you decide to create them, whatever you decide to include, to try and keep that be the same each and every time, so that students know what it is they're looking at and looking for. As well as I would encourage you to go through and say, okay, when you see this, you're going to see these things. This is what that means. Okay. So I want to show you also to please notice I don't have a rubric here. So I can add a rubric, and I like rubrics quite a lot because it's just easier to click on the actual aspects based on what it is I want them to be able to do. You can create your own rubric, but you can also find rubrics from before. And what's interesting about moving material from a class to another class, and just in Canvas, one of the things that Canvas has updated is that I can look at all these past classes and I can find rubrics in all these different places. That's a new aspect that Canvas has added. So if there's a rubric that I really liked in a different class, I can find it and I can look at it and I can include it and I can actually adapt it. So I'm just going to choose a rubric that may or may not fit. I like to put dates on my rubrics as well because sometimes I update them and I want to make sure I have the most updated version. So I'm just going to choose one. And this is not going to fit, but I just want to show you how I've chosen it. And I can choose use this rubric. And so I have this rubric here, and I can go and still edit the rubric that I have. I can change the name of it, and then I can scroll to the bottom, and I can choose to use this rubric for assignment grading, which I often do. You can decide to remove the points from the rubric, which is wonderful. Canvas did not used to have that, so that you can have no points on it. You can assign the points however you want, or the percentages, but they can see the different parts of the rubric that you've marked. So you can handwrite those in. And so you can add criterions, you can find outcomes, but it's really a wonderful thing to be able to do, and you can change it and call it something else. So I'm going to use this rubric for assignment grading, and I update the rubric, and and it's telling me, hey, the points are different. Should I change or leave different? You can make that decision whether you're going to go in and change it. I'm going to just have the rubric change it to work for me, and when I'm ready for the Speedgrader, that rubric will be there for me to be able to click on and grade. Lynn, did you want to add something about rubrics here?
Yes, I think rubrics are a great way, again, to incorporate your student learning outcomes. Each assignment that you create, it's good for students in terms of a thorough assignment, and especially in an online course, to understand why it is that they're doing the assignment, how it connects to the outcomes of the course. So for each assignment, if you come up with some outcomes, you can build a rubric or use an existing rubric. Building rubrics that are connected to your assignment is probably the best way to do this. And then you can use it for grading. That way, then the student knows exactly what it is that you'll be evaluating them on, and then you will be able to use that evaluation in order to make sure they've hit those outcomes for that assignment. It's a very valuable tool, and it definitely makes the grading go a little bit quicker. This is if you're using a subjective style kind of assignment. So in English, we use essay writing. Essay writing without a rubric doesn't let the reader know what it is, the student know what it is you're evaluating them on. With the rubric, then they know that you're looking at thesis, or you're looking at support paragraphs, or whatever it is. Letting them know that helps them to understand why they've received the grade they've received. And it does make your grading go a little quicker when you have that rubric that you can mark.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I am now going to move actually to quizzes before I get to the grade book. And I had a question of a few people have asked questions about quizzes. And I want to make sure that I'm really clear that quizzes on Canvas can mean actual just quizzes that you might do that are maybe mid-stakes. Maybe you want to see that they understand the material. Maybe you don't want them to use notes. They probably are going to, though. If they're going to use Canvas, you need to create with that in mind. But they can also be super high stakes exams. They can be multiple choice. They can be short answer. I do want to share that if there is a correct answer, like you use a multiple choice, I highly encourage you to make sure that for every single answer that they include, that you give them a little explanation of what the right answer is and why. So I have a practice quiz example here. I have one that is, again, to show you that it is not public, and I keep my quizzes, again, unpublished until I'm ready to use them. If we take a look at a quiz here, it just says, hi there, this is a brief timed multiple choice quiz based on the readings. Once you start it, you must finish it. You have 10 minutes. I will tell you that when I am dealing with DSPS, which is now called something else, and I cannot remember the acronym, I think SAS or something.
Student Accessibility Services, SAS, Student Accessibility Services.
Thank you. I got the initials right. I just didn't know what it stood for. Thanks, Lynn. So I make sure with the timing that I have included the extra time already embedded, so I don't have to go back and fix. So I don't have it for this. I just wanted to show you this, but when I am doing the quizzes, that's what I tend to do. And so if I want to preview a quiz and it's opened, they can choose a question, and I'm just going to choose the first one, and I'm not reading it, but I have multiple choice here. So I am going to go to the submit quiz. You have 7 unanswered questions. It reminds you, submit anyway. And I did this question correctly here. And so you selected this answer as the correct answer, and then I let them know which answers are incorrect and why. Okay, so it shares here what they are. And you can create a quiz that's an exam style where it is an essay quiz. And I encourage you to I encourage you to make sure that whichever quiz you create, if it's a high stakes quiz, you can easily move it into the high stakes area or the project 1 or 2 area. So you can give quiz instructions here. And we talked last time, I was with someone, and if you wanted to, you could give an uploaded explanation of how to take the quiz. So you can do a little quick video sharing how to take the quiz. If you were doing a languages quiz and you want students to hear the actual word or the question in the target language, you can actually, for each quiz item, you can do a little video if you would like to. When you create the questions, you can add a new question or you can find older questions. So if I wanted to do a new question again, I can include any of these. I can include a video, I can include a visual, and I can change the number of points. I can check accessibility. So every single, whether it's a page, a quiz, an assignment, you have all of these items to be able to do that. You have the correct answer, which would be here. You can change which one's going to be the correct, or you can have more than one correct answer. And with opening up, you can have your explanation of why an answer is correct or which one is correct. etc. And you can get rid of and you can edit. And you can also notify users that the quiz has changed. Okay. All right, so now I want to go to grades. And you'll see there's only myself in this particular practice class. Everybody I added to the class is a teacher. So if you want to add this, you may. But I wanted to show you some wonderful aspects of Gradebook and give you some tips as to how to use Gradebook to your advantage. Okay, so we have the Gradebook here. You can arrow down, you can look at an individual view or the gradebook history and see what you've worked on last. And also if you're co-teaching with somebody who has access to the gradebook, you can see who graded what. You can view where you can arrange your assignments, which I really like here. You can arrange them from due date, oldest to newest. You can arrange them from modules first to last. That's what I would choose because I do use modules, but some people choose to use pages. And so you can just have it be oldest to newest. You can make it assignment name, etc. It is up to you, lowest to highest. And you can also just move the assignment around by clicking and grabbing and moving. So those can move around that way as well. You can decide to import or export your gradebook. You can download your gradebook and have a copy of it there. The things that I am the most excited about in terms of showing you in terms of grades that make a big, big difference are these two aspects right here: messaging students who and setting default grades. If you have a class where you have 30 to 40 to 50 students, and you would like to set a default grade, you can set a default grade for students by either A, putting zeros in already ahead of time for those students who have not turned it in, and then you can set the default grade out of 30 if you're just looking to see that they've finished it. You know, with low stakes assignments, I like to go in and see how they're doing the low stakes assignments, but later on down the line, I give them credit for completing. So I can set the default grade. I can choose to overwrite or not overwrite. And so if you have 30 or 40 people that you want to do the grades for, you can see it go all the way down the line, and those student grades are included. And like I said, you could do that for the zeros too. You could actually do the, grade every single one and then use the default grade for those students who have not completed. I also like the message students who. I use this all the time, especially towards the beginning. So if students who have not submitted yet, I may take this wording out, so you can change the wording here. And you can write a little message that says, this is just a friendly reminder that this is due by tonight, or this was due yesterday, or this is due in 2 days. Or, you can decide to message the students who have submitted or scored more and give feedback that way. And it's a message that goes to each individual student. And what's great about that is that students feel like you have looked at what it is they've done and you appreciate and you give them the feedback. It goes right to their email as opposed to them having to look at the comments. So I will often do overall feedback. I've graded all their essays. They've gotten their individual comments on their essays, but I want to send an overall letter to those who've actually done the essays. I send the message to those who've scored more than 30 or 20. And then that way the people pop up here and you can take out any of the information here. And I will share that students who have not submitted yet, so many students write back, thank you for reminding me, I will get that in tonight. And a lot of times I like to remind, especially those first 2 weeks, remember our due date is on a Wednesday. This assignment is due This is just a friendly reminder to get it in tonight. And I use this all the time.
I'm going to add just a little bit to that.
Yes.
Messaging the students just as you finish grading an assignment, just to take the time to be able to send a message to those who hadn't submitted, reminding them, or to ask them to contact you. Especially now, I'm using this feature a lot right now as we've moved to remote instruction, because I have many, many students for whom regular deadlines are no longer really feasible. And I've broadened out all my deadlines and allowed my students tons of flexibility, but I still want to send them a note after the due date for each assignment and let them know, hey, we didn't hear from you, but we would love to still have you turn that in.
Right.
And then I also think it's a good idea, as Janet has noted, to send a message to those who have turned it in, letting them know that you've graded it, and then reminding them to go to the grade book and take a look at your comments.
Right.
Because if they're not subscribed through their notifications to view the comments, they won't know to go and look at it, or they won't know that their assignment has been graded until the next time they go into Canvas. This way, it allows them to see that something has changed and through their email, and then they can go in and take a look.
Absolutely. I use this all the time. And I use it in my face-to-face classes too, especially with students who are brand new to turning things into Canvas, because you have to hit the submit button twice. You have to hit submit, you have to put the item in, and then they have to hit the submit button again. And sometimes they forget that second submit button. And they're like, I turned it in, but it's not there. Like I go into, oh, I know, go back and do it. And that way, this lets them know that they have not submitted it, as opposed to thinking that they already had and wondering why they got a 0 for it. I also want to point out, so I'm clicking on here and I'm seeing this 30. There's this little arrow here, and this is really an important little arrow that if you have not noticed it, I would like to point it out to you right now. Here it is. So this arrow opens this up, and this shows the status. And so if these little colors are very helpful, especially if you are using the due dates. The colors will let you know if a student has turned something in late, if something is missing. And what's fantastic is that you can actually put an E in for excused, and you can leave a comment there. And then that way it does not count for their grade or against their grade. Now you can choose to just not put anything in at all, but what I like about this excused is that it lets the students know that don't worry about it, they're okay, and they don't have to turn that in. So you can leave a comment here as to why it's excused as well. You can also go straight to Speedgrader and take a look as well. Would you like to add anything to that, Lynn? Right, so, all right, I'm gonna X that out. I want to point out here that there are some keyboard shortcuts if you like to use the keyboard. I think this is just a useful thing to take a look at.
Alokja?
Pardon?
You were mute for a second. I don't know what happened.
Oh, it just says my internet is unstable here. Okay, can you hear me now? Awesome. Okay, so if you click on this little, I look at it as a little radio here. There are some keyboard shortcuts if you are using your keyboard as opposed to a mouse. And if we go to the icon here, there's choices for late policies, and you can make some choices about whether or not you are going to automatically apply a grade for a late or a missing submission. And if you've been reading the book, Grading for Equity, there's actually a suggestion about not giving a 0 for a missing submission because it ends up messing up a student's grade. And so you can actually make a choice to give a certain percentage for a missing submission as opposed to a 0. And then you can also automatically apply deductions to late assignments if you so wish. And there's the grading policy where you can automatically post grades as you do them, which this is the default, but you can also decide to manually post the grades so that grades will be hidden until you're ready for students to see them. I don't know why somebody would use this. Maybe it's for a high stakes assignment and they want to make sure that everybody's is turned in before other people can see their grades. I don't know. But I always have chosen the automatic to post the grades. Lynn, do you want to add anything here? Okay. All right. So I now would like to go to discussions for just a moment. Okay. Show you some choices with those. Keep having to move us around here. So there's a few different things you can choose with discussions that I would like to show you that you might find to be valuable here. And one is a discussion forum that I posted on the Remote Teaching Resources site, but I would like to show it to you here, where if you want to jigsaw a reading, but have students share and you're not choosing to do specific groups, you can divide up the jigsaw by last name if you would like, and then ask students to follow a thread for their particular article. The reason why I enjoy doing this is that if I have jigsawed something, but I would like other students to see the other article and also what other students have said about the other article, I like them to be on one single discussion forum. So I wanted to show you that sometimes what I will do for certain discussions is that I will start the threading myself, and then that way students can reply specifically to my thread as opposed to just replying all here. I also want to show you that there is a choice here that I like a whole lot about discussion forums, that if you would like to have a discussion forum, but you do not want, you do want users to post before they see anybody else's responses, you can click on this where users must post before seeing replies. That way they answer everything in their initial post before they are able to see anybody else's. Now there is a workaround. Students can technically just put something silly and post in order to see everybody else's posts, but usually they don't tend to think about that. I've not seen a lot of deleted responses with that as well. You could decide.
Do you use that feature pretty often?
I do, yes, I do. Not always, but yes, I do.
I have to say that I was in a class last year where they used that feature. It wasn't in Canvas, but it was in a different interface, and I hated it. I hated that I had to put my whole discussion post down, not really knowing what other people were saying, not really knowing exactly what it was that, you know, some of the nuances that the instructor was looking for it. Well, I think it's helpful to see what other people are writing.
Right, right. Well, and that's fine. There are times that I want students to be able to write down their own responses before seeing, but I'm always very transparent about if I use that feature. So that's
got it.
Students aren't worried about it.
I mean, I get it. I understand why you would do it. It just, in my personal experience, it was like, it was mind-boggling. I was like, I can't, this is not a discussion. I can't even see what people are saying.
Right. Well, right. But then the first person yeah, but then there's always the first responders. Like I have just, you know, I tend to be a first responder. And what ends up happening is that the first responders are the ones who always set the tone, and that may or may not be.
I got it.
You know.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, I think it depends also on what you're asking for the discussion. So for this particular one, there's no value in having students wait to see it.
I just also wanted to remind us of the time. We're at 2:42 right now.
Yes. All right, so before I actually leave, I'm planning on actually leaving the Canvas site to go back to the slideshow. Does anyone have any questions? Is this a good time to answer any questions that people might have while I'm still here before I go back and talk about some other good practices, Lynn?
Right now, there's a couple of questions. Does Canvas give the option to view the graded discussion responses in the Speedgrader?
Yes, absolutely. If it's a graded, and what's fantastic about it is that you are able to see the responses. Let me show you here because you'll see mine, I think. Let's see, although it may be me as the teacher. I'm in here as the teacher and the student, which doesn't work so well. What happens with the discussion, and I'm sorry I'm not showing you a real class, I just don't want to take a video of a real class. What happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's not good to show people's grades.
Right.
Or, you know, there's privacy issues.
Right, but you'll see right here, these are my responses. And so you'll see those in Speedgrader. And I can use a rubric to grade them. And you'll see all my responses regardless of when I posted. But it will show when I posted. So you can see that I made all my posts at one time. If you're wanting students to leave a post on one day, leave another post on another day, you can see whether they are doing it or not. So you can choose to view the rubric and decide that you're going to save that. And with this particular rubric, you can see that I did not choose to use it for grading. So I have to go ahead and put the points in. And so what I would do as a teacher is go back to the assignment and fix that particular aspect, okay? And then you can add comments here, and you can also use a video response. So yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions before I go back?
Hi, this is Marcella Doutro, and I had just a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for all the advice. It's really helpful.
You are.
You had talked a little while ago about releasing the quiz answers. Right. And something I always struggle with, and I'd like to get your input on, is I tend to wait a week until after the quiz due date to release the answers, because just to keep the quiz robust in case students are sharing and talking with each other. Now, given our current environment, I actually haven't released any of my quiz answers yet because I'm being a little bit more lenient in accepting late work and late quiz answers and late quiz submissions. But the reason I struggle with that is I think it's important for students to know the right answers on any quiz questions that they miss, because I think that helps with their learning. But I'm not sure if I'm comfortable releasing the quiz answers while still allowing students to take late quizzes in the future. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I think that that's a really thoughtful, pedagogical issue. And I probably would, this is just me, and then Lynn can answer, that it depends on how long you are allowing students to take late quizzes, and are the quizzes high stakes or are they not high stakes? So if they are high stakes and you are giving them until the end of the semester to take these quizzes, then those students who've taken them on time, I feel like they have a right to know what their wrong responses are before they take another quiz, right? So if they're using the material in the future. But the other thing too is that you can always, I know this is maybe a pain in the rear, but you could decide that you come up with a slightly different quiz for those students who have not taken it on time. And that way you can give the responses back to those students who have already taken it, so that they can get, have those. And so maybe you have a first quiz and a second quiz.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I haven't had time to create second quizzes with all the transition, but I did think about that too.
What's the concern, Marcella? Are you worried that they're going to talk to each other and give the answers?
Yes, it's mainly that, because we do have a lot of students that know each other and take classes together, which is fine, but just to make sure that I'm keeping that academic honesty.
Right.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I mean, I would err on the trusting my students and trying to get them the information on what their assessment is so that they can use the information as they continue to move forward in the course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that may require that you have to make the second quiz, which I'm not sure
Right.
you're going to want to do. So it might be better to come up with an alternative assignment for, no, that's not going to work. I don't know. Look, or just have a for the higher stakes items, have something more subjective, some other kind of assessment that's a little more
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a very interesting and tough question.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, it's good advice. And I like how you mentioned higher stake items because some of my classes do have very few tests that are higher stake. Others have a quiz per chapter that is lower stake. So maybe I should look at those differently. So,
Right, I
okay.
would, for sure. All right, so I'm gonna come back and I will tell you this slideshow is gonna be available and there's lots of links of things that you can take a look at. But I'm gonna run through these items quickly for you. And again, I had talked about some tips about creating your format, and I just showcased a sample format that create whatever format you're gonna use for the rest of the semester, whatever that is, and stick with it. You can change it the next time around, and this applies both to modules, how you set up the modules, and my sample class gives a sample module, a sample unit that I've used in my classes. It also includes Lynn's sample unit from remote teaching. So it's both to the modules and assignments, and then be transparent so students know what it is you're doing. Also, I recommend that you be like speech or communication professors. State what you're going to say it, and review it. That's with the grading too. So I want students to know what's due, so I have it on the calendar. I have a roadmap for them or a weekly checklist, which we'll talk about in a minute. I have an announcement. I send out a weekly announcement, and then I do messages and grades. All about, it could be a single assignment that I do that with. And I know that seems like that's a lot, but students then become used to those particular reminders. Specifically with remote teaching, you don't want to lose those students. And so students sometimes need those reminders, and that's okay. And then my tip, and I talked about this with Whitney before we started, if you're going to use a tool outside of Canvas, such as VoiceThread or some other tool that they're interacting, maybe it's Padlet or something else, I always have students come back into Canvas. There's a short little assignment with a text entry box where they have to note the date of their participation and a couple of things that they learned or a couple of things that they shared or one and one. But I always have them come back because it's too difficult for me to have to constantly go back and forth. I am checking outside, but not to lose anybody, not to lose anybody's assignments. It's also fairly easy to transition assignments depending on what they are online. And so I actually have a sample assignment here that I have for my face-to-face class, and then I've put it online. So I would like to encourage you to go back and take a look at both of those. And there's very small changes. One is a physical journal that they bring to class. The other one is a Google Doc that they keep, this ongoing Google Doc with their entries, and they have to turn in that same link repetitively, similar to like a journal. So there are assignments that are face-to-face that you can actually transition to online very nicely. Sometimes you just have to think about it for a little bit and think about, okay, so how can they show me what they know in a different way that's not too difficult? Also, I had talked about this, keep assignments unpublished. Oops, I've gone too far. Keep assignments unpublished until you're ready for them to take a look at them. Use an assignment as an educational page. Both of these I've spoken about. I showed you on Canvas, but you can come back and take a look. I also have included some helpful handouts here. These are from Lynn, Angela Hott-McGow, and myself. I have Lynn's weekly checklist here that I changed to a Google Doc, and I have my template. And I want to encourage you that if you're using Google Docs or using things over and over and over, to create templates and call them templates so that you can go back and use a clean copy again and again and again. I have a copy here of Lynn's sample communication plan that I updated for my own self. So it shows differences, so you can look at her sample communication plan and what she's doing with her students, and I have included what I changed for my own students, just to know that you can take whatever it is that we're using and tweak it for yourselves. So they're great ideas. You don't have to follow them exactly. I have a sample, again, metacognition journal and a sample exam redo. That exam redo is from Angela. So if you decide that your students have not done well, that they can go back and reflect on what it is they've done and give them an opportunity to redo. And so that might mean that you duplicate a quiz and then change it a little bit to have them do the redo. And then I have a sample grading assessment handout that I give to my students about how it is I grade and why and what I'm looking for them to do in the class. I've included a link to a sample remote calendar that I've created for my English 103. So I made changes to the regular calendar. So if you've not let students know that some things have changed, you might want to do that. So I took my regular calendar face-to-face and I changed it into a remote calendar where, and it looks different. It looks very different than my regular calendar, where I have a place where everything for the unit is due, and then I have specific due dates. So I have a 3-week unit here, and here are the weeks. Here's the court content overall. And then I have it broken down into what's due Wednesday, what's due Friday throughout the unit. And I have that for every single one of my units. With quizzes, again, I just want to remind you they are low stakes and high stakes. And I want to move forward because I want to ask Lynn about what she ended up, I want to talk about this for a minute and then I want to ask Lynn a question. So when you are commenting on the various assignments, you want to think about how you're going to comment. And in Lynn's communication plan, she talks about what to expect. And so you should be thinking about that. Based on, I share a little bit here about what I do. For lower stakes assignments, I usually do more of an overall feedback, except at the very beginning. For higher stakes assignments, I do give them individual feedback, and I have a Google Doc that's called Comments for Students. And based on every single assignment, I have comments that I make quite regularly. I make sure that I am using their names, however, in order when, I'll say so-and-so, and I will have the cut and paste, and then I will add some individual information for them. I have some slides here that encourage you to think about your own practices in terms of grading, but I'm going to skip down because I want to talk to Lynn about what she did to transition her course to be remote.
Okay, so what was the question?
The question
What did
is,
I do to make my course be remote?
Right. What changes did you make for students? You had talked about grading. You changed to
the basic change that I made for grading was that I allowed for my students to revise any paper that they wanted to for a passing score or for a higher score. That no paper, it's English, so it's easier to do this, but you can do this with objective assessments as well. You can allow a student to retake a test until they get the score they want. You really can. And if you take a look at the equity module, that's on our remote teaching site. There's a bunch of great resources there for equitable grading practices. And there's a whole book that if you're in the liberal arts division, you can get from Frank Mixon. He's offering it, called Equitable Grading Practices. So what I basically did was allowed for my students to continue to revise after they get the feedback. My units are set up so that each assignment builds on the previous assignment, and whatever feedback they get on the first assignment gets incorporated into the second assignment to the third, so that by the time they get to the end, they have hit all of the outcomes. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, I use rubrics for everything.
Right.
That way then, oh, and I asked them to create a self-evaluation. That's one of the main things that that really helped when I moved to remote teaching. I did it in the face-to-face class too, which they also appreciated, but allowing the students to have some agency in their understanding of why they deserve the score they do. I use the rubric, they give themselves a score, and then they evaluate why they deserve that score. And 9 times out of 10, they lowball themselves and I score them higher. But those are just a few of the methods that you can use in grading to create a more, or a less pedantic and a more conversational or discussion grading practices, which I think during this time, students have good reasons for why they may not be succeeding at the rate that you would expect they would. So it might not be a bad idea to ask them and to allow them to redeem.
Right. I am going to take, I want to share with you that if there are any other questions, you can ask them. I am going to stay online for the next few minutes if you would like me to. If you feel like you need to jump off now, that's fine. I wanted to also just share these slides as well. But before that, are there any questions that I have not answered or Lynn has not answered just yet?
Hi, this is Shameen.
Hi, Shameen.
Hi, I was wondering about attendance on Canvas. If I have a day when nothing's particularly due, how would I assess which students to mark present for that day? I know there's the user details section, but I think I have to go student by student on that.
Okay, so a couple of things. The first is that you can decide that you have a sort of check-in or attendance type of assignment due on a particular day and count that actual assignment as attendance. I used the attendance aspect of Canvas up until we started meeting remotely, and then I stopped using that particular attendance and I used just a little check-in assignment.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and students know it, that particular assignment is used for attendance, so that it's really important that even if they're late on the high stakes assignment, they need to, you know, like an essay or whatever it is, that they do need to do that each week so that I know that they're here.
I use the discussion board as my attendance. So each week I will, my discussion board currently does not have points attached to it. So I use it for attendance and I'll go through and take a look at who posted or responded in the discussion board. And then in the day that my class originally met, then I add in a positive attendance on that day.
Okay.
But that's a little time consuming because you do have to go through the attendance. I tend to write it down on a piece of paper and then go into the attendance window and fill it out. It's not ideal.
I was looking on Google and it said if you go to the user details, you can go student by student, but that Canvas doesn't have the option to let you see just like a long list of students on a day-by-day basis who accessed it.
Mm-mm. I mean, I think it does analytics for the week, but I don't know if it, I mean, I think you can go by student and see when you're going in, but not by page or assignment, or that does that by the week.
Right, and that's not even really truly accurate too, because if you're having them do work, like let's say they have a textbook and they're doing work in the textbook, they're not going to be on Canvas, but they are doing the work. So it's not necessarily a super accurate way to determine whether students are doing the work or not.
I'm not sure how important the positive attendance is. I know we have to turn it in with the final grades. It's typically something we turn in. So in online instruction, it's important to do the regular and effective contact hours, but in remote teaching, that's something slightly different. So this is a good question for us to bring out in the Q&A on the remote teaching site and for us to ask the Faculty Senate. So I think we should keep talking about that, Janet, with April, and sort of see what are we going to be required to submit, and how do we keep track of it?
Right.
I think it's a really good question. I think we should look into it.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. Anybody else with a question?
It looks like we've answered all the questions that are on the chat.
Okay, so I'd like to go back, and like I said, if you need to drop out, go ahead and drop out. That's fine. I just wanted to go over the last few slides that I skipped over just quickly. And I was talking about.
I do have to go, Janet. I have a 3 o'clock.
No worries. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to drop out real quick, but thanks everybody. And if you do have questions, you can message me on Pronto or through email or whatever, or ask Janet. We're going to talk after all this too.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, Lynn. Okay, so I just wanted to share a few other quick things that in addition to communication guidelines, especially with online classes, that when I'm writing comments that I use names, okay? And I also try to be positive in my communication with my students no matter what. No matter what, I try to be super positive, even if they are asking me a question that I find to be a bit rude. I may say, oh, are you asking this? Like, I'll rephrase it and then I'll answer it. And a lot of times students, even without me prompting, will apologize for the sort of demanding tone that sometimes they take. I also wanted to share that sometimes too, instead of telling students the actual answer, like they may be asking an answer that I have shared before, I might direct them to where to find the resources as opposed to just telling them the actual answer, so that I'm helping support their use of Canvas and understanding of use of Canvas. And I want to invite you, since Lynn is not here to check the chat column, to just please ask any questions just verbally. I also encourage you to think about how you want to comment on Canvas so that you are not over commenting and wasting. And what I mean by wasting is it's not a waste of time for the students, but you do need to have some time where you are off and you have a break, and what your times where you're willing to be on and not. And so for various assignments, I usually reserve individual commenting on assignments that are high stakes, with the exception of a couple of the first couple of weeks of the low stakes assignments. And other than that, I will use that default grader to give them credit. Now, I don't tell them I'm using the default grader, I just do. And I might spot check here and there. Let's see. So there are 3 other slides that I'd like to share, and then we'll be finished. I encourage you to think about your grading priorities, meaning that what do you prioritize in the classroom? And the question that was asked about quizzes and when do you let students know the answers to quizzes, you need to think about what you prioritize. And so, for example, English professors prioritize students' ability to read, think critically, and write source-based papers. Sometimes our policies make it seem like we value other things. For example, compliance with formatting requirements. So yes, I do have an aspect for formatting requirements in my rubric and points, but it is not worth the same as other items. And so please make sure your grading policies and feedback align with your most important classroom values. And it is very easy to move away from those classroom values because it's easier to grade those little things than it is the classroom, than the things that you truly value. That takes a little bit more time. So I'm constantly trying to make sure that these align. Be especially thoughtful with early assignments. A lot of times students, this has been a few weeks now. Some students might still be afraid about turning things in. If students haven't been turning things in, be intrusive, reach out, find out that message that I talked about with the 3 dots, the messaging going in and sending a message to everybody who hasn't turned assignments in. A lot of times you find students will respond back to you and tell you what's going on so that you can assist them. And also, again, I try to provide positive feedback all the time, but I try to provide positive feedback on that first assignment. And the last slide here is I encourage you to address English learner surface errors strategically. So again, not marking every single error that they make. That's not helpful for their learning, but noticing patterns and giving them feedback strategically where, okay, I'd like you to work on this time, and then they can work on something else a different time is helpful. So that is all.